Hi, welcome back to another Sunday installment of our weekly card reading series over here. How are you doing? How's your week going? What's going on in your life? You don't have to answer those questions for me. I'm just asking you to get a little centered in yourself right now as we get ready for this reading. You know, maybe take a couple of deep breaths. Reflect a little bit on any questions, any queries that you have going on, things you're looking for insight on to help you navigate right now, whatever you're going through, as we get ready for this reading. Sorry I can't shuffle these cards properly. They're cut and pasted onto index cards. I can't wait to get the actual deck so I can show off my amazing shuffling skills that I was so proud to develop when I was 8 years old. So in the first position here, the first card that came up in the spread for this week is the reality check card. This card is about being willing to really think clearly and carefully and think about how we're thinking and how we're arriving at our conclusions and our beliefs, and being willing to check that against the actual evidence in a situation and to check that against the basic rules of logic. This is a really important part of self-love, because part of self-esteem, having positive self-esteem, comes from a variety of factors, but one of the factors it comes from is being able to feel competent to navigate life and to interface with life effectively. And the only way that you can really do that is if you're grounded in reality. Like, if you're going around operating on assumptions that are very faulty, operating on belief systems that aren't based on anything in reality, or that are based on lies, or that are based on logical fallacies, you know, if you're jumping to conclusions and running with assumptions that don't really make sense or that aren't backed up by the actual facts of what's going on, then you're not going to be able to really interface with life in an effective way, because your mental map of what you think is going on doesn't match with what life is presenting you that is actually going on. And so this card is about taking the time to really check yourself, you know, to really have a reality check and look at, like, where is there something going on here that in my thought process or in someone else's thought process that I'm trusting or that I'm giving authority to that doesn't match to reality. You know, anytime you're really getting swept up in an ungrounded agenda, whether it's your own or someone else's, the way that that can really happen is if you are allowing nonsense to pass as if it was valid. And everyone does this sometimes. You know, we get carried away in ungrounded narratives of our own, of other people's, for all kinds of reasons. And when something happens where you really bump up against reality, the reality of a situation, and you're forced to confront with the fact that, wow, the assumption that I was working under clearly was not correct. Or, you know, I had an idea that things were a certain way and they're actually not that way. And life is showing that to me very blatantly. This position in the spread is about the context that we're coming out of. So with this card coming up here, it's making me wonder if something happened in the past week where you were forced to confront, like, wow, I had an assumption about this person being X, Y, and Z, and actually they are not that way, and their behavior is showing that to me. Or I had a belief that about something, and now, like, that's clearly being disproven, you know? Or I had an assumption that was not realistic about how this situation was going to pan out, or what my capacity was going to be, or what someone else's capacity was going to be. You know, any kind of thing that came up where you really had to, like, get grounded in reality and had to be like, oh shit, like, life just checked me on that. My assumptions were not realistic. That's what this card is about, and it's about our willingness to really take the time and slow down our thinking and think carefully enough, not just think about the topic, but think about thinking. That's called metacognition, like thinking about how you're thinking and what your process of thought looks like, and where there might be errors in that are taking you off track with things. Because the more you can be careful with that, and the more you can really pay attention to that, is the more that you can stay grounded in the reality enough to be able to respond effectively, and to be able to have that self-esteem from knowing that, like, okay, I can interface with reality effectively, and I can kind of trust that someone competent is at the helm here, you know, meaning like your own self and your own thinking. This middle card, this position in the spread, represents the main focus area for this next week. This is the Stop Hurting Yourself card. So, I mean, this card is pretty straightforward. It's like, if there's some kind of pattern you're in that is causing you harm, like, stop doing that, you know? Like, if you are overextending yourself and getting run ragged, stop doing that, you know? If you are having an issue with some kind of compulsive behavior, like, get help for that. You might not be able to stop it 100% on your own. You might need to look into support resources. But this card is the wake-up call to be like, hey, like, quit doing that thing to yourself that is hurting you. You don't need to be still doing that. You know, if you just stay in a situation that is causing you ongoing harm, and you just continue to participate in that pattern in the same way without making any change, then that's a surefire way to invite shame and pain into your life. You know, your self-esteem is going to go down because of that. And that's all not really helping you have good self-love. So, you know, whatever it is, if there's something going on that is hurting you, that is diminishing your being, that is causing you unnecessary pain and suffering, that is bringing a pattern of destruction into your life, and you're still doing that thing, this card is the wake-up call to say, like, don't keep doing that. And if you need to get help to stop doing that, then maybe it's time to look into getting that help, you know? Or if you already have, like, support system in place to help you deal with that pattern, maybe it's time to lean into that a little bit more. Like, lean into whatever processes you have in place that you've already developed that help you cope with those patterns, so that they're not running the show and derailing you. And then this final card in the spread, this card is called Genuine Yes and Genuine No. This card is about being really, really honest about our yeses and nos, which most people are conditioned not to do. So there is a learning curve with that for almost everyone I've ever met. You know, when we're not really being deliberate and honest with ourselves and others about what we really want to say yes and no to, then our life becomes inauthentic, and we're not able to show up in an honest way to our relationships with other people, to ourselves, to whatever roles we're in our life. Being really honest about what you do and don't want to say yes and no to is the opposite of people pleasing. And you might not always have a clear yes or no right away. You know, you might need to take some time to reflect and to really sort through what it is you want, or you might be in more of a maybe position where you're like, well, I kind of need to let things unfold a little bit before I know for sure, or I might need to give myself some time to reflect. Like, that's okay. This isn't a pressure to, like, have an exact rigid binary answer immediately to everything in life, but what it is saying is just to check that people pleasing and make sure that you're saying yes and no to things that you really want and need to be saying yes or no to, instead of like giving a knee-jerk action of what you think the other person expects from you, or what you think you need to do in order to be a quote-unquote good person, or you know, to smooth things over in situations. Like, when when you're kind of knee-jerk reacting from that place of like, oh, I just need to give whatever answer is going to keep the peace, like that's people pleasing. And that is how you end up in situations that don't really work for you in the long run, because you couldn't deal with the discomfort in the short run of giving someone an answer that they didn't want to hear, you know? So this position in the spread is like the advice for dealing with the main focus area. So the way this spread is coming up, it's like, watch your people pleasing and stop people pleasing in situations where that's putting you in a compromised position. Don't keep like knee-jerk agreeing to things that don't work for you if it's not a genuine yes, because that's putting you in positions that are harming you, and you need to like not be doing that anymore. And something probably came up that made that really clear, and you need to like heed that information and respond to it proactively. Yeah, I think that's kind of the main message that I'm getting from this particular spread with these cards. Let me know if that rang any bells for you. If not, that's fine too. And I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you again next Sunday for another reading. Thanks for joining us today.